Hello viewers, this is Wolf here. Welcome to Wolf's Haven and to some more Monster Hunter figure reviews. Today, we're going to be taking a look at another set of Monster Hunter Figure Builder Cubes. Now this set, I actually got them individually, so I don't have the full box here, but this is of course another set of 4 within the Cube line. And the 4 monsters that come included with this set is, of course, from left to right, we have Malzeno. As you can see here, Malzeno looking pretty good in the box there. Of course, we have our series icon, Rathalos, right here. Then we have my personal favorite, Zinogre. And then last but not least, we have Amatsu, looking really good in there. So, I'm going to open these up, assemble them up on their stands, and then take a look at them and see what they look like in this line. So with all 4 of the monsters here out of their boxes and set up on their stands, just like with the other Cube series, I feel like these are looking pretty good, pretty decent so far. So we're going to take a look at Rathalos first, to just get a good idea of what the color detail is like, and what some of the texture work is like on this. And overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. Like, I do like how they've captured some of the reds and the oranges throughout Rathalos' body here. They did use some really bold, sharp black coloring to make out the patterning on the back of Rathalos' wings here, which of course makes them very distinct, as well as the black line going down the back of Rathalos' body all the way to the end of the tail. I think that a lot of that stuff looks pretty good. I do like how they've detailed the tail as well too, especially the barbs. The barb at the very end does look very detailed with the texture. It does look very grooved, which I do like. So the tail is looking pretty good, especially with these spikes on the sides here as well. And I do like some of the scale work that they've done on Rathalos. Unfortunately, not everything is perfect with this Rathalos here, because there are certain areas that do look kind of flat in regards to some of the texturing and the paint. Certain areas, like in here on the intersection of the wings, you can just see how flat these colors look. They just look very low quality, and I'm just not a fan of that. It's almost like looking at a video game that's very low res. That's what this kind of reminds me of, like a very low resolution wing here for Rathalos. So I'm not a big fan of that. At the very least though, Rathalos' pose with the wings kind of coiled in on themselves like that does in a certain way kind of hide some of those faults. But despite that though, you will still notice them on these areas here, on these parts of the wingtips as well. You're going to notice some of these like blotchy colors, which don't really look the greatest, unfortunately. You even kind of notice it a little bit on the back here, especially with this part where the texturing and the paints just look not the most detailed. They just look kind of blotchy, and it's not the best looking, unfortunately. If we take a look to Rathalos' face here, you can see that when it comes to the eye, it's kind of just a simple blue circle in there, and not the most detail when it comes to the mouth. You can kind of make out the teeth at the top there, but again, there's not really going to be a whole lot of detail here within this line in regards to like the facial detail. I do like how some of the spikes look on the side of the head and on the back here. But outside of that, I think that despite the flaws, I do think that Rathalos, at the very least, like, it looks decent. It's not the worst, but I do think that there's certain areas that they could have improved on this. Again, like, I do like some of the scaling, some of the areas around the legs, like the red sections around the legs, I do think look all right. But yeah, there's definitely some areas that are lacking a bit of texture and color detail here. So we're going to take a look at Zinogre next. So I'm liking Zinogre a bit more than Rathalos, but there is going to be a similar tune in regards to Zinogre here. So we'll start with the positives first. I actually really do like the pose here that they've took with Zinogre. I do like how Zinogre's looking straight up into the air, basically looking like he's charging up from those thunderbugs and getting ready to use some of its strong lightning-based attacks, which that's always a plus. This is a pretty cool pose, especially with the tail, how the tail is arched in such a way that it looks like a half moon shape. That's pretty cool. And some of the other stuff that I like about this is some of these brown spikes that line the back of Zinogre's body. If you run your finger along these spikes, they actually do feel fairly sharp. And I do like how pronounced and how distinct the fur on the back of Zinogre's body is, especially as you go all the way up the tail here, looking pretty good, and then ending in these little twin spikes here on the very end of the tail. The fur on the hind legs and forelegs are looking pretty good, as well as the underbody right here as well. So when it comes to some of the areas that I'm not the biggest fan of with Zinogre, is some of the color detail when it comes to Zinogre's scales, these little blue and greenish scales, could be a little bit better. I feel like the blues are a little bit faded. They're a little bit dull, not as colorful as I'd expect them to be. Same thing with these browns. These browns are also kind of dull as well. And there's some areas, like when we look at the transitioning points between the brown spikes and the blue scales here, I do feel that there's a little bit of dullness there as well too. So just certain areas of this I feel could look a little bit better. Even when you look at the foreleg here, you can kind of see the seam right here as it goes through these spikes here of where I guess the leg is kind of attached. Like, I feel like I'm not a big fan of that. But when we take a look at Zinogre's face here, so with the eye, they actually did do a little bit more with the eye here. You can see that the eye is actually two-tone. You can kind of just barely make it out, but there is a blue sclera and a gold iris there. So a bit more detail than what they've done with some of the other figures, where, you know, at the very least they did more than just kind of doing one blue circle. But, you know, it's not very easy to notice the eyes. It's very easy to just overlook that. The mouth doesn't have a whole lot of detail in it either. You can just kind of look, it's just kind of a flat color, not a whole lot of texture work going on in there. And yeah, I think overall this Zinogre is just, it's decent. Like, it does have some flaws in it, just like with Rathalos. I do like this a little bit more than Rathalos. I feel like there's, in terms of the consistency, Zinogre looks overall better than Rathalos. And there's certain things that I do like. Again, like some of the texture work, like with the claws here, with just how they look distressed and grooved. I think those look pretty good, as well as some of the twisting spikes here around here, and just, again, the spikes going down the chest and then around the back. I think all of that stuff looks good. My main gripe with Zinogre is just kind of the color detail. I feel like the colors could look a little bit more vibrant. But outside of that, I think it's decent. It's definitely better than Rathalos for sure. So now we're going to take a look at Malzeno. And you can see Malzeno just kind of popped out of the stand here. So this is something that I'm not sure if I mentioned in the other cube video, but because these stands are very thin, the peg doesn't sit very far into the stand. So for certain monsters, like for instance this Malzeno, if they're not balanced all that well, if they're very top heavy, they do wobble around in that stand there, and it's very easy for them to fall out. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a design flaw here with the stand base. Like, I'm hoping that if Capcom makes more of these Cube series statues, I hope that they maybe increase the thickness of the stand here so that the peg can sit in a little bit more and become a little bit more stable, because it is very easy for Malzeno, at the very least, to just fall out of that mounting spot. It does not fit tight in there. It literally just kind of sits in there very loosely. So it is something to be aware about if pursuing these statues. So anyway, with all of that out of the way, we'll take a look at Malzeno's details. And unfortunately, I'm actually quite a bit disappointed with how Malzeno looks. It's not the worst. I do think it's okay, but there's just so much inconsistency here with Malzeno's design, and some of the most eye-catching stuff of Malzeno, the golds are just not all that pronounced. Like, if you look at the end of the wingtips, you barely notice those golds. And what's even worse is that if you look at Malzeno's horns, these golds are so dull you can just easily mistake these for just being a flat brown. They do not look very distinct at all. Even some of the gold lining, which is supposed to be on the top of Malzeno's head, that stuff, you can hardly even notice that. It just blends in with the gray around the body, which I'm just not a fan of that. And then some of the fins here, you can just see the pink fins just look so faded. The paintwork just looks very splotchy. It's just not that great. I do like how the wings look, but even with that, the wings still look kind of dull. There is a bit of a color transition here where we have these pinks that transition into the reds going towards the wingtips here, but unfortunately, it's just not very vibrant. It doesn't really stick out all that well. You don't really notice the color transitions all that much in the wings. Those pinks do not stand out very much, and unfortunately, the pinks are just very inconsistent. So you'll notice that the most vibrant part of the pinks on Malzeno's body is the fur that's on the forearms here, or the forelegs, I should say. So these parts are very vibrant, but then if you compare that to the fur on Malzeno's chest, there is a very, very stark contrast between the two. The fur on the chest is just very dull. It's a very dark pink, which just doesn't look all that consistent with the fur that's on the forearms here. And then, of course, there's also the contrast of these with the wings as well. So, unfortunately, the pinks are just very inconsistent going throughout the entirety of the figure, which I'm just not a fan of seeing. And then, when we look on the underside, there is this pattern of these gold stripes on the underbody of Malzeno, which, unfortunately, like the rest of the body, the golds are just not that pronounced. So these stripes don't even end up looking like gold. They kind of just look like silver stripes on the underside, which is unfortunate. Even on the claws, I honestly forgot that Malzeno had gold claws here, because these golds almost blend in with the blacks. Like, it's definitely hard to notice them. The best looking golds on the body are definitely these ones on the very ends of the forearms, right there, right behind the pink fur. But outside of that, it's not really looking the best. If we take a look to the back of Malzeno, you're going to see more like lack of color detail here. If we look to the top of the wing here, you can just see more of this splotchy detail, which we saw from Rathalos's wings, and I'm just not a big fan of that. Like, just a lot of this just doesn't look all that great. Even when we look to the musculature right here, where we're supposed to see a bit of gold lining on the musculature connecting the membranous wing here, the golds again are just very hard to notice. They just blend in with the grays, and it's just not the best looking Malzeno that I've seen. When we look to the fins here, again, this stuff just looks very, very washed out, just not very good looking. And one of the other things which I noticed right away is the tail. So there's supposed to be a very distinct color transition here with the tail, where we get these golden spikes, but unfortunately, there is just no gold to be seen here. It's just the entire gray body going all the way through to the end of the tail, and unfortunately, it just makes everything blend in with each other. It just doesn't look very good. So unfortunately, I'm actually very disappointed with this Malzeno. Like, in terms of the pose, I do like the pose on it, especially with how the wings are outstretched and how Malzeno's kind of propped up on the hind legs. I do think that that's cool, but outside of the pose, a lot of the other details here are just very lacking. Even on the legs, there's supposed to be some gold highlights on the hind legs here, but again, they're not very pronounced. I would not blame you if you didn't notice any golds on Malzeno at all. Like, they're just not that great looking. Even on the wingtips here with these little spikes, they just look more brown than anything else. So unfortunately, this is probably my least favorite of the statues within the set here. So that's unfortunate. However, Amatsu is going to save the day here, because I think Amatsu easily looks the best out of this whole set here. Amatsu is looking very vibrant and very colorful, especially with these colorful wings here. Because these wings have a nice translucent effect here, you can almost see through them, And I just love the color transitions that we have there, from these dark green spikes on the ends of these fins, and then we go from these yellowy clear colors all the way down into these deep greens as it meets the body. So I do think that that's pretty good. I do like, as we look to the undersection of the tail here, how we do have this separation, the little segments in between the scales here, which I do think is really good, and then it's lined with a lot of that green. And the other thing it's nice to see on the Matsu, but is also just baffling, like considering how Malzeno looks. The golds on Amatsu actually look pretty good, because Amatsu has these gold horns right here, which do look very shiny, and very pronounced. It's just weird that these golds look really good, but on Malzeno, the golds are just like the worst aspect of it. It's just very strange. But yeah, these gold horns on Amatsu look very good, and again, just looking at the whiskers, we have these very long whiskers that stretch outward quite far away from the statue, which look very good. Again, continuing on with that translucent aesthetic with the fins here, which just look really good combined together. The fins here have this nice patterning with these orange and yellow designs going all the way through each of the fins here, looking really good. And the back looks really nice as well here, with more of these hidden fins at the back down here. So overall, like, this Amatsu is looking very good. Even onto the tail area, I do like how distinct the scales are, especially with this dark green color, and just how the tail kind of ends in almost like this teardrop shape with more of these translucent oranges and yellows. So Amatsu definitely does steal the day here. If we take a look to Amatsu's face, again, there's not going to be a whole lot of detail here, but there is a gold eye that you can kind of make out. The teeth is kind of just barely noticeable there, not the most detail in there. And there's a bit of a gold patterning on the chest of Amatsu here. Some very long green claws as well. And you can just see how pronounced those green parts of the fins look on this. Because of the translucent design, once light hits it, these fins are going to glow, and it's going to be very eye-catching. So overall, I think Amatsu is easily my favorite out of this whole set here. Malzeno has to be my least favorite, which is quite strange, a little bit disappointing, because I feel like under normal circumstances, my favorites would usually be either Malzeno or Zinogre, but I feel like they just completely dropped the ball on Malzeno in this set here, and Zinogre does look better, a little bit more consistent, but there are certain aspects where they dropped the ball on that one as well. So unfortunately, those ones are going to take a back seat here. Amatsu is easily the best looking one out of this set here, and yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for this video here. I do think that if you guys have been eyeing the Cube series, some of the lack of detail, the inconsistencies with some of these statues is definitely something to keep in mind. But outside of that, I think they do a pretty good job with some of the other statues, especially with the previous Cube set that I looked at. I do think that this is a pretty good set of miniatures to have. I feel like this is a very good scale, and just the quality when compared to the regular figure builder miniatures, as well as the monster gallery monsters, is just much better than those in a general sense. So I think if you guys are eyeing these, obviously pick these up with caution, just keeping in mind the lack of detail on some of these statues. But I do think that these would be a good purchase to have along with your other Monster Hunter statues for sure. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys found it informative. There's definitely going to be a lot more Monster Hunter figures and content coming in the future, so I hope you guys stay tuned for all of that. But until then, I hope you guys have a good day or good night, depending on where you are, and I will see you all later.